Little PSA at the beginning of this video. If you guys see a few less videos from me than normal, or if I'm wearing the same shirt in a lot of them, I'm doing a couple of videos a day in a row here because I'm actually moving and I'm not going to have internet for a little while, for like at least, a handful of days. So I'm trying to get some stuff done ahead of time, but just keep in mind that I won't have as many videos out as normal until like next Monday, and then everything will be back to normal. Anyway, welcome back everybody. My name is Tucker, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about the Washington Wizards, a team that had their season end in the NBA bubble and certainly had an interesting year. And this is a really difficult franchise to kind of figure out what they're going to do moving forward to allow themselves to become a good team at any time in the near future. They have limited assets, limited young talent, and a salary cap situation that certainly is not envied by any of the other teams in the league. But we're going to talk about what they could potentially do moving forward as we head into the offseason. But really quickly before we get started, if you enjoy content like this, then consider subscribing. I upload basically every single day, and leaving a like rating is a great way to let me know that you're enjoying the content, and it helps out the video a ton as well. And I definitely notice when the likes are through the roof, I make a note and I'm like, okay, let's make more videos like that. So if it's something you're enjoying, it's a great way to let me know. With that said, let's go and get started. Okay, so the Washington Wizards, not surprisingly, had one of their worst seasons in recent memory. They had their worst season since 2013, which again, not surprising. We knew coming into the year that there was going to be pretty limited talent on this roster, but there were some bright spots. Bradley Beal had another fantastic season, has once again proved himself to be one of the better offensive players in the entire league, and a borderline bargain on his current contract. Despite it being expensive, he's definitely worth it as a player. Some other bright spots: Davis Bertans turned out to be one of the best shooters in the entire league, and there's mutual interest between both the team and the player in re-signing him this offseason, as he is an unrestricted free agent, because the Wizards gave him an opportunity that he has not had to this point in his NBA career to shoot 10 threes a game, and the Wizards obviously want the floor spacing that he provides. So great season by him, and he'll be looking for a new contract this offseason. Apart from that, a handful of young guys had some nice moments. Rui Hachimura is a rookie that I still really like. I think is definitely going overlooked among this rookie class, just because I feel like he belongs. When you watch him play, he's got offensive game at every level of the floor. He's going to continue to improve his three-point range, and he looks like an NBA player out there. He doesn't look like he's going to be a bust. Not necessarily going to be an all-star or anything, but someone that is going to be a really, really solid player for the next however many years for Washington, so I like him as a player. And then other guys like Bryant, Jerome Robinson, there are some guys along the edges here that you could talk yourself into getting excited about. I think Bryant is probably more notable at this point as a big guy that has a little bit of skill and is a pretty good athlete, good body control as well. And Jerome Robinson, since coming over from the Clippers, had some nice moments specifically in the bubble. So there are certainly some bright spots on this roster, but of course, it's going to be difficult to do much of anything in terms of a rebuild moving forward, apart from trading away Bradley Beal. And as they go into the offseason and into next season, the big question mark here, of course, is going to be John Wall and his giant contract and his ability or potential inability to return from a serious injury and be anything close to the same player. And if somehow John Wall comes back and is like an all-NBA caliber player, then that changes everything for this team. They can definitely be a good team in the Eastern Conference. They can make some moves to build around Wall and Beal once again like they were before he got hurt. But I think it's pretty unlikely that he comes back anything close to an all-NBA caliber player. And the Achilles injury is going to be tough to come back for anybody, but especially for a player like Wall that was never a great jump shooter to begin with and relied a lot on his athleticism. And that athleticism is going to be much tougher to rely on than it would have been, obviously, pre-Achilles injury. And that's one of the reasons why I feel like it's going to be easier, certainly not easy, but easier for Kevin Durant to come back mostly the same player from his Achilles injury, because he is such a great jump shooter and he can kind of adjust his game if he does have limited athleticism, whereas I don't think John Wall is going to be able to do that. So certainly those things are a concern for Wall on top of the contract, and that is really the biggest thing holding this team back. And so that makes things really difficult, and even if he comes back at like 85% of what he was before, they should be able to push for a playoff spot in the Eastern Conference, but outside of that, there really isn't a ton of upward mobility available for this team if he's not going to be like an all-star caliber player. And as we look now at the payroll, Beal is actually, as I mentioned, kind of on a bargain deal here, but when you combine their salaries together, and especially if you're considering that you're probably not going to be getting great production out of Wall compared to the amount of money that he's making, it's going to be really tough to rebuild anything here in Washington outside of trading away Beal, which doesn't seem like something that Washington is all that interested in to this point. They're going to go into this offseason with just under $15 million in cap space, assuming the cap space, or the salary cap, numbers remain the way that they would have pre-suspension of the league. But of course, Davis Bertans is going to be needing a new contract. And I mentioned in the beginning how there's mutual interest between both sides in Bertans returning for next season. The Wizards obviously want to bring him back because they could have traded him for value at the deadline and chose not to. And as I said, Bertans got a great opportunity to have, the biggest role that he's had to this point in his NBA career in Washington. So I would imagine they're going to want to bring him back and ultimately will be successful in bringing him back. And if they do so, they will have very limited, if any, salary cap space left over after signing him to a new deal. And so if they do that, they're pretty much locked into this roster for next season. And right now, I think that's the path that they're probably going to take. They're going to bring back Bertans. They're going to hope that Wall returns relatively healthy, that Beal is going to continue to be a great player, and that they can push for the playoffs with that group. And I think that's a realistic expectation, that they can be a playoff team next year. If they bring back Bertans and John Wall is giving them 85% of what he used to give them, they should be a postseason team. And that might seem like a bit of a boring plan, but I honestly think that's one of their best options. When you're committed so much salary long-term through at least the summer of 2022 between Wall and Beal, both those guys have a player option for that offseason. Beal, depending on where he's at, will probably opt out, but Wall more than likely will opt into a $40+ million season that year. And when you're locked in like that, and either you're unwilling to trade the guy that has value, or nobody else is willing to trade for the guy that doesn't have value in John Wall right now, it's really difficult to do anything other than just kind of keep the roster together. And I think it's really, really smart, actually, of this Wizards team to keep Bradley Beal around until at least next offseason. It's still a possibility that they move him at the trade deadline, but when you think about the summer of 2021, or whenever the offseason is in 2021, there's going to be a lot of teams chasing stars in free agency, and some of those teams are going to come up empty, or they're going to bring in the guys that they want to, and they're going to want another star that they're going to want to trade for. And when you're looking at the landscape of the NBA right now, there aren't very many of those guys that are going to be available that aren't already free agents in that 2021 offseason. So you've got Bradley Beal kind of out here as the wild card in that offseason, which should, in theory, raise his value higher than it is right now. So I think it makes a lot of sense to keep Bradley Beal until the 2021 offseason. Run it back next year. You bring back Bertans. You see what Wall looks like. You probably make the playoffs. You allow guys like Rui Hachimura, Thomas Bryant, potentially Jerome Robinson to develop. And then if you want to try and hit the reset button in 2021, I think that's peak value trade-wise for Bradley Beal. And of course, it's still going to be difficult when John Wall's on the roster. I don't think anybody's going to want to trade for him for the lifetime of his deal. And so it's difficult to begin a rebuild with like a $40 million handicap on your salary cap. But that's just kind of the position that Washington has put themselves in right now, and they can really only do the best with what they have. And what they have right now is not an ideal situation, but if they wait until 2021 to potentially trade Beal, I think that's going to be the smart move. Now, outside of that, it certainly would help if they got some lottery luck over the next couple of seasons if they do not make the postseason, and they're going to need some of these younger guys to develop if they're going to be anything over the next couple of years. But more than likely, this is how things are going to look for Washington over the next couple of years. Next year, they're going to run it back. They're going to bring back Bertans. They're going to try and push for the postseason. They're going to see what Wall looks like. In the offseason of 2021, assuming that this coming season goes pretty much the way you'd expect, where they win a good amount of games, but they're not a threat, certainly at the top of the conference. At that point, they'll probably look to trade Beal for some assets. They'll look towards the future, trying to build around whoever. They'll get high draft picks for the next couple of seasons. They'll have extra picks and young players that they got in the Beal trade. At some point, Wall's contract will run out, and they'll have this really nice young nucleus of players somewhere around 2023, 2024. That's honestly where we're at right now for Washington. You have to project like 4 years into the future to see where they're actually going to start to begin to turn some things around. That's just the timeline that they're on as a result of their payroll, as a result of their unwillingness to this point to trade Bradley Beal. They could have jump-started this a while ago, but they chose not to. And the fact that it's going to be difficult to do any kind of real high value, efficient, successful rebuild when you're dealing with $40 million constantly on your payroll and John Wall. So that's where I'm at right now for Washington. It's not the end of the world. They have a great asset in Bradley Beal that they can trade away to jumpstart their next era of Wizards basketball, but they're going to have to wait a little while, not only to get peak value for him, but also for the Wall contract to run out. And eventually they could start to build something promising there in Washington. And yeah, there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video. And I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.